Just to introduce myself, as Jeremy says, I'm Catherine Dove. I've been working with the South West Heritage Trust for just over 3 years now. I've previously worked in two other HERs. So I'm probably running up to about 15 years worth of experience in the field now. I have a master's in the archaeology of buildings, and buildings is my particular interest and specialty. Obviously, when I've come to HERs and found whether or not they have a large amount of buildings, built structures on them, I've always, but just out of habit, started to adding them, as it were, anyway. In advance, I should apologise that most of my examples will actually be from Baines or Bath and North East Somerset, as that's the particular patch I manage on a day-to-day basis. I work with my colleague Chris Webster to cover Somerset HER, but I'm mainly focused on Baines. So most of the images, such as this one, ones you'll see from that area. And again, I'd normally start my talks with a slide like this, showing archaeological excavation in the landscape, and point out that HERs are a way of recording this continuous research and investigations. In this case, it shows how buildings fit into a much wider archaeological landscape. Here you can see one of the local groups, Bacchus, excavating the retaining wall of a pool that sat in front of the mansion at Prior Park. There is a famous Palladian bridge in the foreground, built in 1755 and believed to be by Richard Jones. It's actually an exact copy of the one by Richard Morris at Wilton House. Ralph Allen, who owned the Bathstone mines on Combe Down, which is just over the hill behind your back as you're looking down the hill, had the mansion built to showcase his stone. Much of Bath was constructed of this stone, and the River Avon that runs down the bottom of the hill was actually made navigable partly so that Ralph could then send all the stone off to a wider trade network. So for those of you not familiar with our neck of the woods, this is how the HERs are laid out in this area. It's worth noting that Exmoor National Park incorporates part of Somerset and Devon, but has its own HER. Whilst North Somerset and Baines were originally part of the historic county of Somerset, they were incorporated into the new county of Avon in 1974, before being broken up to make their own authority areas in 1996. Oh, and don't forget the little bit of Somerset down there. But what do we mean by buildings? This may seem obvious, but it soon becomes apparent that at some stage we blur the line between archaeological remains, structures, and buildings. So I think we'd all agree that we can see a few buildings in this picture. This is the centre of Bath, for those that you don't know it. But where do we separate the above ground concert room in Abbey with its underground vaults, the 19th century museum structures on the left, the subterranean Roman baths and remains of the temple of Sulis Minerva, and the sacred spring and possible pholos or amphitheatre that's also supposed to be at this site, not to mention the Mesolithic remains. This is Halfpenny Bridge. The original bridge was constructed here in 1863, but collapsed with tragic results due to overloading in 1877. Its replacement incorporates the original toll house and abutment on the Widcombe side. The abutment is marked with flood heights for numerous flood events, which you can see here. This is a milestone that's on North Road, Combe Down. Is this a building? You might say, of course not, but both bridges and milestones are often designated as listed buildings. Buildings are also an intrinsic part of landscape studies and need to be understood in their full context. This is Kelston Park. Originally, there was a 16th century house with landscape gardens, so outbuildings and earthworks are still visible if you look in the top left-hand side of the pictures. On the left and just out of shot on the right are two of the outbuildings that were associated with the house, and in the background, it's not immensely clear here, but that's the earthworks of the original building. In the distance on the top right picture is the 1760s mansion by John Wood the Younger in grounds laid out by Capability Brown. In the bushes and trees in the bottom left-hand image is hiding a 16th century reservoir that fed a fountain, the earliest known flushing lavatory in the earlier house, and then ran under the churchyard to reach a group of fish ponds. There's also the site of the 17th century Darrow house, rebuilt in Italianate country style in 1835. The bottom right image shows copper slag capping on the boundary wall, which may originate from William Champion's copper mines at Walmley. It's important when we're incorporating sites into the HER that we establish their landscape context and consider which other heritage assets they relate to, buildings or not. Such as a church with its churchyard and rectory, which itself will have associated features. These two face each other across the road. It's one of a line of pillboxes placed to defend a natural barrier or pinch point, such as a ford across a river, and with its associated defensive structures such as anti-tank cubes. Or a railway line with its stations, bridges, tunnels, signal boxes, goods sheds, embankments, and housing for station masters and railway workers. Ensuring that we record this information in a logical and systematic way allows us to ensure the data remains robust, searchable, and more accessible to our users. You can see here on the left that we have a parent record for the railway line, and it has child records under comprises, and that has different elements of this railway line that's been recorded separately. I make no apologies for returning to this slide in order to consider levels of protection for our built structures. The highest set of designations are those that are recorded on the National Heritage List for England. Of course, Bath itself is covered by the World Heritage Site. However, it's worth noting that Baines Council have also added a supplementary planning document for the setting of the WHS, which covers a much larger area. We then have listed buildings, which are themselves subdivided into grades 1, 2-star and 2. The Abbey here is grade 1, the Concert Hall is 2-star, parts of the Roman Baths Museum are grade 1, and the row of houses fronting the Abbey churchyard are a mixture. There's a grade 1 building just peeking around the corner of the Abbey, but those that you can see here really are grade 2. In the last few years, we've completed a review of the listed building data that is recorded for Baines Authority area. To give you an idea, there's approximately 3,750 listings in the whole of Baines. The review involved assessing each structure against the listing description to polygonise the extent of the main structure. We did not include curtilage, as this was massively beyond the scope of our resources and extremely difficult to establish on the fly. Any discrepancy in the listing data, such as overlapping listings between buildings and point data in the wrong location, we discussed with the minor amendments team at Historic England to ensure they also benefited from the exercise. So back to the photograph. Most of the paved area here is also part of the dispersed scheduled monument for the Roman Baths and site of the Roman town, which covers several open areas both inside and outside the historic city walls. The few remaining sections of the walls themselves are separately scheduled and listed. There are further built structures sitting within the registered parks and gardens in the city. Other levels of protection are given at local authority level. The entire city of Bath is covered by a single conservation area, which has been broken up into character areas for management purposes. The project is currently taking place to create appraisals for each character area. Many of the settlements outside Bath also have conservation areas, and many of these also have their own appraisals. Over winter, I've completed a small project for the HER to run through all of these appraisals for Baines and add relevant information concerning individually recorded buildings, as well as larger settlements to the HER. Some of the buildings are named as unlisted buildings of merit, or significant buildings making a positive contribution to the special character and interest of the settlement, and it's useful to record this data in the HER as well. Another local designation that Baines Council have made is that of local parks and gardens. This is based on the list compiled by the up until recently named Avon Gardens Trust, who recently merged with the Gloucestershire Gardens and Landscape Trust to form the Avon and Gloucestershire Gardens Trust. Now there's a mouthful. These sites include those parks and gardens recorded on the National Heritage List for England, but also have other locally significant areas, such as Henrietta Park here. This brings me on to local listing. In 2022, the Heritage Trust and Exmoor National Park Authority received funding that allowed us to employ 3 project staff for 1 year and create the local heritage list for Somerset at Exmoor. I should say I was actually at Exmoor National Park at this time, but I assisted coordinating with the South West Heritage Trust, and together we built up the project. Each authority area now maintains a separate list and ratifies its own set of nominations, but the project allowed for the creation of a joint framework, including a technical guide and set of criteria for assessing individual heritage assets for inclusion on the list. Importantly, both HER databases are also used to manage the data for the list, recording the stage of each nomination and any decisions that are made concerning whether an asset is added to or rejected from the list. This is despite the fact that Somerset and Exmoor are maintained on different software systems. Heritage assets that are not on a local list may still be considered as non-designated heritage assets. These are identified during the planning process and may not actually be recorded on the HER as a monument when the application is first received. In practice, most sites recorded on the HER would be considered an NDHA when assessed, but this depends on their significance and their survival. We do, for instance, record the location of destroyed sites. Some buildings and sites recorded in this way may actually be of national significance, but may not yet have been studied in detail or put forward for assessment. It is essential that any reports that are generated by the planning process are accessioned onto the HER promptly to ensure that robust information is available for decision making. The example here discusses a building in detail that was previously unrecorded on the HER, but was identified as an NDHA in the planning process. It provides a good discussion of the standing remains and a review of existing supporting documents such as maps. We spend a lot of time reviewing available resources of information, such as thematic publications like Pevsner's Building of England guides, local history books, newspaper articles, surveys undertaken by local groups, and assessing them against historic mapping and other available archive and archaeological material to identify new heritage assets to add to the HER, as well as enhance our existing data for sites. Recent enhancements I have undertaken for Baines include adding the turnpike roads and their associated structures to the HER, as well as reviewing the comprehensive Gazetteer of Industrial Archaeology in the Bristol region published by the Bristol Industrial Archaeology Society. I also occasionally just visit a settlement or area and have a poke around, seeing what I can spot. Here's an old parish boundary stone up on Widcombe Hill that hadn't previously been recorded on the HER. I genuinely find just going and having a look round to be one of the most important aspects of understanding the site, and use every opportunity I can to go and have a look at something. In particular, it helps you to understand the topography and intervisibility between places that you just can't get from a purely desk-based exercise. Excuse me. As was the case with local listing, we do sometimes receive funding to undertake other projects that provide good information to support the HER and enhance our buildings data. There have been extensive urban surveys projects in both Somerset and Baines. I just happen to have a nice map of the ones for Somerset. So these are the 45 that took place in Somerset between 1994 and 1998, including Exmoor National Park, which is the Dunster and Alverton one. These give useful background information on each settlement and provide information on their growth and sometimes decline. They also identify where possible the location of historic features. Some of these settlements do not have a long history and some are no longer urban in character. Both areas have also been subject to historic landscape character surveys. Somerset's included that part of Exmoor within the county. A survey was begun for Avon in 1995, being completed after it was broken up. Excuse me a moment. Always a tickle when you're talking to me. This rather alarming screenshot from our website shows the two sets of data displayed where the two areas meet at Radstock. So I don't know if you can work out from bottom left to top right, the colours change, and that's where the boundary is between the two areas. Both areas explored the current character of the landscape by revealing the historic processes that had created them, displayed using GIS. As you can see, both urban and rural landscapes were considered as part of the studies. And thankfully, that's it. Thank you very much.